I don't know whether that has properly gone live or whether it's not properly gone live. Aha, that looks better. I just needed to be a bit more patient for my phone to catch up with everything, so that's rather cool. Right. Sorry, I've got quite a lot on my desk and I've gone live a little bit ahead of 7 o'clock because that's my preference to let, and then I know everything's working and I've got a chance to sort things out. Hi Faith. Oh, why's my phone decided to misbehave? That's always very unhelpful. There we are, now that's behaving. It's interesting, I get different systems on different pages at different times just to really confuse me, and that doesn't take a lot. As we all know, I'm more than a little technologically challenged. So I'm just going to swap. Am I going to sort? No, I'm going to leave that as it is and I'll swap towards the end. And I'm going to get rid of my my glasses, and it's those two that are looking big, so let's just get rid of those for the moment. There we are. Cool, and that's now caught up, or at least it's telling me that Faith is watching. There's a lag, of course, between streaming and it appearing on the page, so that's just designed to confuse me, and really doesn't take a lot. Hi Caroline, thank you for joining me. Hi Faith, and we've got Aura also watching. That's lovely. For those of you that follow me on Facebook, I put a post up earlier on just to warn people that some great big pain in the backside has decided that he will use my Instagram profile picture and set up an account that isn't mine but is using my picture, and if you look at it at very first glance it looks very similar to an account that I might have created. So please just be aware, check the accounts properly. If you already follow me and you get such a message, ignore it or report the account to Facebook. My account is jill.not1961, nothing else, and the extra account is added with an underscore at the end. If in doubt, message me. I have of course reported it, and I thank several of my other friends for having done so too. Hello Michelle, bonsoir. So for those of you that are joining me for the first time, my craft room is a conservatory, which is lovely, and it means I have beautiful natural light, but it also means sometimes that life can be a bit noisy when the heavens decide to open. And guess what? Because I'm live, the heavens have decided it's time to open. Anyway, it must now be 7 o'clock. She says, yeah, it is. So we're going to do a project that is quite big tonight. License group are normally about an hour, but there's no one following me. So if it's all right and we go over, I'm going to do that. This is a huge plaque. It could just as easily be being made on a canvas, and you could actually manage it on a smaller one, but this was the size plaque I had, so this is the size plaque we're using, and this oval is approximately 18 inches long, so we might have some jiggery pokery and some work on the side whilst we put it together, and we might have a bit of backing and throwing, so but we'll try and make it sorted out as much as we can. So this is sort of a vague lineup of where we're going. I'm obviously now going to dismantle that lot, and so no doubt the finished piece won't look remotely like it, and we're going to do some bits and pieces with my beloved Pent Up products. So let me just remove these. All of these papers are by Ciao Bella, and they are their Indigo collection, so I just need to offload this lot. It won't matter if they don't go back in the same places, so there we are. We'll just tuck these assorted in different areas, so hopefully I've got a reasonable chance of getting them back approximately where I wanted them in the first place. It's never quite guaranteed, of course, in this world, but that's what's going to happen. But hey ho, so there we are. Right, so we come back down to the extra bits and pieces. So I have some violins, some treble cless and some notes, and these are from Mad Hatters. So if we just lift these off, and I'm sort of talking you through my process for how I put things together, so those can go safely onto a chair. Now clearly, with a piece that's 18 inches long and is 13.5 inches wide, 12 by 12 scrapbook paper on its own is simply not going to cut the mustard. It's just not, is it? So we're going to do a little bit of piecing together. So to get this covered, so there we are. So if we start from there and we'll build this across, that torn line isn't going to be visible, so I'm not going to worry about inking that, but that will help. There we are. Let me tie it on its side for the time being. There we are. So there is my board, and I'm going to line up one edge and one edge, and I'm going to glue that in place, and we're going to pull all the pieces together as we go. Now I'm going to tuck these over, and I'm clearly going to need to be tucking bits in and out, so let us just pop that onto there. And I rather like the idea of the torn edge here, so bear with, we're just going to pull this piece apart. And I'm rather hoping what this will allow you to do is understand my thought processes as to how I was putting this together. Now I've got a gap here that I don't particularly like, so we're going to do something about that. And we need that piece there, and I want another torn edge that isn't exactly even. So let's turn the back of that, and I don't want a particularly sharp edge there, so let's take this piece and we're going to pop that there. I will be doing a little bit of inking and stuff, and I might actually think that I'd quite like a piece of this coming into here, because I just think it will even up the colour better. So let's just pop that into there, like that, like that, like that, like that. So this is just a way of allowing me to cover a board that is way bigger than a 12 by 12 piece of scrapbook paper. And I thought that that would be quite a helpful process for people to understand. And this piece, again, isn't going to cover everything, but I rather like the top of that. So let us just pull that across and go there, and clearly I now need a piece to fit into there, so I'm going to balance that with a piece of this paper that I had at the start, and we need some scraggly edges because that's better than a straight edge, because we have a bit here that needs to be covered, and so we'll take that over, and hopefully we then end up with something that looks vaguely pleasing to the eye. Now, horror of horrors, I'm going to get rid of my glasses because I can't see what Alison, it's not terrible rain, my darling. There's two issues. It's a conservatory roof, so it is a plastic roof, and so you can hear the rain bouncing on it. It's moderately heavy, but it isn't terrible. So I've picked up one of the Stamperia Creative Happiness ink pads, and this one is in blue navy, and I'm just going to ink the white edges of this, the torn paper, all the torn edges, so that they blend more together. But before we start putting it together, well, that is the plan. I did think about adding lots of crackle to the background of this, and then decided that I wouldn't, for a whole host of reasons, because we're going to be using a lot of crackle elsewhere. I just want to pop this together to start with, and I do think that this is an easy way, or a nice way, of being able to fill a space without needing a piece of paper that is as big. And the alternative really is to use your paints and your mediums, but it's not an absolute essential to do that. And then we can add our paints onto our and crackles onto our MDFs uses. I'm just hoping that it's a helpful process to allow people to create with things that they, bases, and create bigger pieces for home decor if that's what they want to do. So now you'll normally see me working entirely with Pent Art products, and today I am mixing it up a bit. I just like the Stamperia mixed media glue for doing things like this, so particularly onto MDF. I could have painted this and then used a rice paper glue, but this is easy, and I can swap a layer down, I can pop this on, make sure I've covered the area that I'm wanting to add to, and then I know I need to have that there and that right over to that edge, and it gives me some wriggle room, and down onto there, so that needs to go over there, and I haven't got enough glue there, so just bear with me while I put a bit more glue up there, and I can now use my mouse for my things and just give this a jolly good rub down and let that grab, and then I pop this here to break up that area. Now clearly I'm going to now need to have more glue onto here, and I know I'm going to be taking some of that out, and that's absolutely fine, and then I'm going to just burnish this piece down there. Then I've got this bit to pop onto top of there, so we're going to have a bit more of the same, and I am being very generous with the amount of glue I'm putting on because of the way I'm layering this together, and because the MDF will absorb some of that glue in, and I really do want it to stick down nicely. So there we are, and I know I want to cover that edge, so it doesn't matter if I pop some extra glue over here, and this is one of the reasons why I have definitely chosen to use the mixed media glue for doing this with, because it just gives me that extra movement and allows me to do this. So that piece can now go over onto there, and I need some more glue here, so I'm going to fold that back, just give it a jolly good coverage before I pop it down onto there, and then I can do that and just rub it down. Now the mixed media glue does have a shiny finish, so just be aware of when you're slopping it around, and you either need to coat the whole thing with the shiny finish for long term, or or do something else, or be very careful that you don't get it on the surface. The choice is yours. Depends on very much on what you're going to do. and the look that you like. So let's just put this onto here, but you can, you know, it's the glue is quite well behaved. Knock out that bubble. Make sure we've got that well and truly covered. Now, when I tore that piece, I've torn it a bit short. Does it matter? No. Will we do something about it? Absolutely. Do I want to go there? So I'm going to go there. And we can just have, that's because I did have it over that lot. Or did I? Did I have it that way round? No, I'm sure I had it that way round. Hey ho! You see, the joy of disturbing everything as you go. But it doesn't matter, because we're layering our pieces. So I am going to pop that over onto there. That covers that edge, that covers that edge. And we'll have some gaps to fill in. But that's okay. Let me just burnish out the air bubbles that we've got underneath there, underneath there, and underneath there. We have, I might just, why not, for the sake of it. So we have, I think I'm going to pop that piece there, and I'm going to pop that piece onto there, over there, and we might then add another piece of that over there, just to balance things out a little bit more. So let me just, I'm hoping that by doing this you can see how I'm working and understand my thought processes. Gone, thankfully, are the days where I make a whole piece up ahead of a live and then have to recreate it, which means buying two of everything. Hi Jill, no problems with being late, my darling, none whatsoever. At the moment all I'm doing is collaging some papers onto a very large MDF base, which is, contrary to its current appearance, an oval. So that's going to go there. These are going to be left to dry, and then we will add extra pieces. We'll deal with the edges after it's all solidly set down, because that's the logical thing to do. She says that's not quite, she says, as that wasn't quite over that edge. There we are. And it just will allow me to do that. So, and I was wanting an extra piece to come into here to cover that area. So there we are. Let's just pop a piece more of that onto there. Cool. There we are. So we now have a collage background, and yes, there might be some wrinkles in this at the moment, but by the time it's dry it won't be. Bear with, because what have I not brought in? My water pot. We now have a water pot, which is a better activity for managing that, and that glue can now be lidded and out of the way. And just for ease of management, I'm now going to flip this over. So I've got my collage background, and I'm just going to grab a craft knife and trim this. I'm not going to worry too greatly about it being a perfect trim, because I can sand that back later on, but it will allow you to follow what I'm doing a lot better if I take off as much of the excess as can, and of course I've got other bits I can use then if I want to, or not, as the case may be. So that, there we are. And normally I would let this completely dry before taking a craft knife to it, because I'm likely to pull the edges of the papers in the process of doing this, so just be aware. But it will just add to the effects. There we are. And we'll turn it over. And then say this is a big board. It is 18 inches tall and about 13, maybe 13 and a half wide. So that can go into there. And now I have a collaged background and my piece sorted out and much bigger. And actually the edges aren't terrible, having done that. But I can't now see me. Oh, that's what I did with my ink. There we are. So whilst I've got this to hand, I am just going to ink off the edges with that same, I like this, it is a proper navy blue ink. Which is cool, and that will help edge my piece. And it's one of the ones from Stamperia, so I think it should be reasonably easy to get hold of if people want it. I know there are several companies in the UK that do have them, and for those of you who don't know, then please message and I will happily help you source them. So there we are. Cool. So one collage background onto which we are going to layer some assorted bits. So these now all need a good coat of painting. So bear with, because I know where I'm going with this. So gold, gold, blue, blue, gold, gold, blue. Cool. That was hard work putting in my brain, and these actually it doesn't matter. So let's go gold, blue, blue, gold, blue, 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 gold, gold. That will do. That way at least I know where I'm going with it. Well, thank you, Kay. As I say, I think it's just a way of helping you fill a bigger space than you might otherwise have. I've got a bit of an area here that I'm actually not happy with, because I can see I've got some straight lines. So having popped those over there, I'm actually going to I'm thinking I might actually deal with that bit now, and I need a bigger piece of paper, but hey ho, to cover that area. So let me just pull a piece out of here, and it's purely that I've got some straight lines on this edge that I really don't like very much. So bear with whilst I don't want a straight edge there, and that will sit into here and will again help that break that area up. So I will just grab my mixed media glue, if I can see what I've done it, and deal with that whilst the going is good. But by layering and collaging, you will use quite a lot of paper. I mean, that's used for the best part of 4 12 by 12 sheets to get a coverage I'm happy with, and that's cool by me, because I've got the end result is the look that I want. And of course I will have to trim this piece off, but I'll do that before I glue everything else down. There we are. So that can go there, and you can carry on and layer as you want to. If you wanted to add a paler colour into here, you could put a piece here, right at the bottom, which you can't see because it's off camera, but hey ho, that's the joy of picking a big project. Right, so those are gold, those are blue. There is a logic to that, so let's pop that onto the floor over there and deal with the gold first. And the gold is my, well, I know which order, because I know I've just picked up blue before anyone says anything to me. And that's because I'm going to put gold on the top of this there, which is why I'm working in this order, and some of the others will be the opposite way around. So I'm not priming my MDF. No, it's not a heinous crime, and that's because of the mediums I know I'm going to add on top of this. These pieces, I love these. Well, I love violins. I've made a few pieces over the years, but I just wanted, and I had these, and I just thought, right, let's do a layer. Music is happy. Music's, we've had beautiful music at the weekend, and I would just add, add these, and then work with the beautiful Ciao Bella papers that I had to build up an assemblage type project, but without using lots of pieces of metal. I am using some resin pieces, but for me that's relatively pared back. There we are. Hi Wendy, thank you for joining us. Hi Barbara. So this is what we're doing, and then, as I said earlier, my MDF embellishments are from Mad Hatters, which is a tiny company based up around Aberdeen. So and they cut beautifully, and you don't end up with masses of char, and there's huge numbers of ranges of different products, and you can buy them either directly from her, or you can buy them from Create and Craft. The choice is yours in that sense. So there we are. So let's pop that onto there, and we'll carry on quite happily because these need to dry. Let me just squidge some of that over there. Because we're in the same sort of way that I collaged with the papers, I'm going to collage with my MDF, my resin pieces, and also my paper elements. So it's about building layers and dimension, but most of the things that I make are made in a similar sort of way, by building up layers. So there we are. If we get these covered, and we'll go for 2 gold of those. And some of these pieces you will not see all of, and that is equally fine. And some of them we might end up needing a second care, particularly the resin pieces might need a second layer of. So that's going to be gold, blue, gold. Thank you. Get it round the right way. Excellent. So whilst that paint is drying, I've got a resin frame. Now I primed these with white gesso. and I might have been more sensible priming them with black gesso, but hey ho, it doesn't really matter. As long as I get good coverage, that's all that matters. And I just want, you need something for your paint to stick to, because it won't stick directly to resin pieces. This is a Finnabair frame, just because it's pretty and I liked it, and I have them cast in my stash, so that's why it's getting used. There. Hi June, thank you for joining us. There we are. But I do need to have a good, reasonable coverage of that. And of course, whatever you do, when you're doing something like this, it's inevitable you miss bits and pieces. And I have a Finnabair moth from the Mecha Moths mould. There's lots of them, so I don't know how many of you have been looking at and eyeing up the new Finnabair moulds. The Clockwork Sparrow is gorgeous in that. I like it a lot. I have at least one piece already made with that. I think it's just nice to have that. There we are. And I can see areas where I'm clearly going to have to go back over. But as a lot of these will be covered, some of it won't matter. So there we are. So that can go there, that can go there. Mucky Mitts can get a wipe, because that's what's needed. And so some of you will know the saga of me and a heat gun. So I bought myself a replacement for my quiet heat gun. And that too has managed to blow up, so we've got a noisy one, because I'm not buying another expensive one that then promptly gives up the ghost, because that seems silly, having given it 2 chances. It was there. I think probably it's a bit quieter from the rain point of view. And then we're going to start some fun with some crackling, she says. And we've got 2 different types of crackle out tonight, because why bother with one when two is good, or even more. Hi Sabine, thank you for joining us this evening. I hope your live went well. I think you've probably been live a bit earlier on, haven't you? I really need these pieces to dry out, and the frames can wait a little bit. So let me just get these dry. Why not put it up onto a higher speed, because it's the joy of having a higher speed. Okay, so that's that one. So the next thing, and the reason I've been saying gold, even though I've been painting with blue, is we're going to use some of the metallic crackling paste. Now, getting metallic to crackle as a top layer, if it's an acrylic paint, doesn't work. I've no idea why or the science behind it, but it simply doesn't work. So but the cracking pastes, which come in assorted colours, will crack and give a metallic finish. So that's why. And it has its own primer, or I'm actually using a universal primer, but you do need a primer behind it. And although some of these mediums will crack without a primer, the surface stability isn't great, so I would always say that it's worth going through that. Hi Joan, don't worry about being late. Lives are there are always saved, and you can watch back at any time that you want. And you don't need a thick you know, a big thick layer of this, and it goes on white. So there we are. So that's that piece covered. All right. And I'm rather hoping that we won't take a ridiculous amount of time this evening, but as I say, I do know that I have bitten off a significantly big project, because why wouldn't you? Well, why wouldn't I? Well, that's why is because I had it planned and thought about, and I knew what I wanted to do, and then it, you know, it got sort of bigger, because why wouldn't it get bigger? There we are. So there we are. So we're going to be doing a little bit of layering, or rather quite a lot of layering. There we are. Cool. So that one can go in there. And let us just whizzle this out and dry this layer off, and at the same time. Now what I don't want to do when I'm drying this off is bubble the base by having it too hot, too close, too quickly, if that makes sense, because the bubble affects the final finish. So that's why, you know, not on a live, I would absolutely just leave this to dry on its own. Alison, the new Ranger one was still under guarantee. I just cannot be bothered to retrieve a box that will fit it in it and then send it back to a well-known river site, which is my bad, because it really shouldn't. And it's done exactly what the first one did, that was about a year old, so I'm not impressed at all. So I've decided I'll try to do a completely different brand, because why wouldn't you? The reason I got the Ranger one in the first place was because it was quieter, and therefore it's better on air, but hey ho. So the areas that are dry, you can see where it was white and now that with the blue showing underneath it. And a lot of that area is going to be covered. That's the joy of knowing where we're going. So that can go there. I can see on my resin pieces that I still have some areas where I've missed, which is always the way of the world. So let me just add a bit more blue to that whilst the going is good, because they're going to take a little bit of drying time anyway, and that is equally cool. Right, so I'm not too sure why I put this pot away. In fact, well, I do know why I put it away, because there's a smidgen's worth of stuff in the bottom. So let's just retrieve said smidgen's worth from the bottom of there, because waste not, want not. I do have a new pot, which is equally helpful. And that one can go in the bin. So this is the cracking paste system from Pentart, and it's a champagne-y colour, I think, really. I mean, it's described as gold, and it definitely has a gold hue. I'll not say it hasn't, but it's not a bright gold, is what I would say. So let's just pop this on, smooth this out a little bit. Smooth that over there. I don't necessarily have to have even crackles. In fact, it all adds to the look of it. I'm just going to take a brush and fish out the bits from the bits I know are going to be being seen, and I can paint this on and smooth it out. As long as you've got a reasonable layer, you'll get a nice effect. So there we are. We'll put that onto there. Pop that over there and retrieve for the new pot from here, because that seems like a good plan to me. And this hopefully is actually a bit smoother, and I'll be able to paint this on. It is a paste, so you can actually, you know, you can put it on with with a palette knife perfectly sensibly. Don't want the stuff in that hole. Doesn't need to be thick, so let me just spread that out. I just do need enough for it to give an effect though. There we are. She says, having bits every which way. So let's just add a little bit of the paste to some of these. Yeah. Smooth that off. And this is why I didn't bother priming my pieces, because I knew I was going to add a top layer over, and so if the base colour wasn't entirely even, it didn't actually matter. Hello Mandy Jane, how are you? I think you've probably worked with the indigo papers from Ciao Bella. If not, I'm sure you'll get them to work with at some point from PI. I love them. I think that they're really nice imagery and slightly different to it, you know, as most of their papers are, I have to say, to most makes. So that can go there, that can go there, that can go there, that one can go in the bin. Yuck. And if I don't dry everything as I go, we'll be... Ah, yes, you used the rice paper peacock, didn't you? I'm not using, well, I'm using peacock feathers from the paper, but I'm not using the peacocks from the papers for this. Now this should, with a bit of luck, behave and crackle. She says it's one of the joys of the pent-up mediums is that they are heat settable, and I can see in areas that are thin it is beginning to crackle and craze, which is what I was wanting it to do, but I suspect that you won't be able to see it on camera very easily at the moment, partly because of the reflection of the light on the metallic surface. But I'll bring them up. They surely are very, very scrummy, and I've made a collage background which is currently sitting on the floor out of harm's way. So the reason, so if I was heat embossing powder, I wouldn't wobble my heat gun about. I would just leave it in one place. But if I do that with a crackling medium, then the potential is that it will bubble, and that's not what I want. Which is, so I want the heat to help it to dry and to crackle, but I don't want it to bubble up, which is why I am moving my heat gun about for the time I'm doing this. So this is crackle version number 1. And for those of you that watch me do the collage, you'll know that I use blue papers with gold, and although the papers don't have metallic foiling, actually when you look at them you probably wouldn't guess that, because they are really quite metallic in effect. So these are crackling nicely. And I will so at the distance I think you can see that some of it is crackling. Just bear with me and I'll lift it up nearer the camera for you when it's had a little bit more of a chance to to dry. And as I say, I tend to leave things like this to dry on their own rather than taking a heat tool to them, because the heat tool surface dries and the paste underneath will stay wet and then carries on drying over time. So here we are. So those are dry enough for now. So let me just lift this up. So this is the let's take it out of the that. So where I've got the paste thicker, you've got nice big crackles, and where I've got the paste thinner at the bottom, you can see more of the blue through, but the crackles are really like a fine crazing. And if I come up here, you can see them on there, and the metallic surface just makes life difficult. So that's going to go there, that's going to go there, that's going there, that's going over there. They're not quite dry, and that's fine. So we now have, well, we don't want the wax paste, we want the antique paste. And let's grab a pot. This is antique paste, so this is designed to sit into the crevices and to lift off the top. So we can pop this on. So I'm going to work on the two different sets of embellishment colourways separately, so that we can follow along a little bit. I've got a little bit of turpentine on my brush because I keep my brushes for these in turpentine, because it helps. Well, it's more economical then for my paste. And you're wondering, you know, I've just shuffled this, painted it blue, and now I'm just slopping gold on and making it all gold. And it's not going to stay all gold, I can assure you. There we are. So that can go there, that can go there, that can go there. She says. And now, what do we need? We need a cloth, a clean cloth. So we're just going to now lift a lot of that gold off, leaving it highlighting all of the details in that moulded piece, and we're just going to do the same with this frame as well. So I've got a frame that is two-toned, and I think, you know, as I say, I know some of you have absolutely seen me doing this before. So there we are. So that is one colourway and one set of crackle. Bear with while I grab a cloth for my mitts from behind. So that can go into there. So this is number 2, and this is going to be the gold, the blue set. So one set with gold on the top, one set with blue on the top. Oops, daisy. That was my computer keyboard going flying. So I've got some gold. And I know this won't crackle, and that's fine, because I've got an alternative layer to go on top of this. So bear with, and we'll just get this covered. That's where that's gone. Yeah, excellent. I know that this is a very different shade of gold, but actually you're only going to see it in the cracks, and I'm going to mute the other pieces down so it won't matter. And I am very definitely mixing and matching my products tonight, because I'm the paints I'm using are the Stamperia Allegro paints that I've colour matched to the collection. So I was using the blue navy, and that's in the Blue Dreams collection of paints if you've got them as a set. And but is also available as a standalone paint on some websites, and the gold metallic. I love the metallics, they really are properly metallic. So there we are, let's just cover those. Oh, and I have a plan for these. So let's just cover these whilst the going is good. As I said, I have a feeling that this live is going to go on past the hour tonight, partly because I've taken on a project that perhaps was bigger than was prudent, but hey ho, we lives and we learns and we plays. And that's important, isn't it? And also I think sometimes you can be constrained when you're doing a mixed media piece. The reality of life is that they do take a while, and I could have prepped all of these pieces and done them all bar one, but actually I just think sometimes it's nice to see a whole process rather than a part process, if that makes sense. Feel free to disagree if that's what you think. And I'm not sure if anyone else is commenting, because my screen has stopped feeding me extra comments. So or are you all quiet and just watching? And if you've got questions, thank you, Annie. I do think it is important to see projects in real time, because I think it gives a full sense of how long it takes to do something. And I know I prepped a lot of my, I knew where I was going and I'd prepped in that sense, but sometimes I think it's just nice to be able to see a whole process. Thank you, Julie. I agree. I like to see whole processes. So the only bit that I did do off screen was cast my resin pieces, because waiting for that to set wasn't going to happen, and I primed these with primer paste so that that had time to dry properly. And again, it's a layer of yet more painting, and it's a base layer, and I will never knock it. I do think it's really important that you do use base layers and you do prep your pieces. And even if I'm using which I rarely do, a multi-surface paint, I still like to prep and give it an undercoat. I wouldn't paint that walls in my house with a one-step project, and I like my, I want to, so why do I want to do it for other things? But each of you make your own choices, you have your own time frames, and of course your own budgetary constraints as well. There we are. Cool. How many bits have I obviously messed? Now I've got gold hands instead of blue hands, which is always fun. So those two pieces need to dry. That can get wiped up, and that's not too much going in a bin. Always good. Yeah. Cool. And so what am I going to crackle some of these pieces with? I'm just going to give those a waft dry. So they're not quite dry enough at the moment. They're almost touch dryable, but not quite. So let me just bear with while we get these done. Right, okay. So for this one, I am going to use the one component crackle from Pentart. Now this is a PCP product, paint, crackle medium, paint. if that makes sense. Don't need it soaking down into there. You're welcome, Mandy, and thank you for joining me. I think I will probably post tomorrow the finished piece. If you don't have time to check out the whole of the lives, because I know that it's a bit of a headache, and time for all of us is a very precious commodity. More rain. It's obviously going to be one of those days, isn't it, where even though it is not April, the showers have decided that they will come down. I've got a busy week because tomorrow I got asked to do at relatively short notice and out of sync with where I would normally be doing it, a live for Pentart. It's just a bit earlier in the month. And I'd already agreed to do the live here, so there we are. So that added to the preparation. And then at the weekend, I am going to do a scrapbook class, album class. Tamara Morton is doing her first class since lockdown, face to face. And I thought, well, why not? Why not go and support a good friend? Well, I'm very glad you've got sun, Faith. I think you were fairly miserable the other day. And Joan, I'm glad, and I really do hope the rain isn't coming your way. Now, this is another crackle medium that is safe to to heat dry, but again, you definitely don't want it bubbling. So, which is why I'm wafting my heat tool around. Joan, have you managed to avoid any rain today? If so, you're very lucky, because we certainly haven't. It's rained intermittently pretty much all the day. I came out of the gym, having had a swim, got myself wonderfully dry. Was meant to be meeting my husband for a coffee, and had to phone him to bring me a coat rather than meeting in the coffee shop together, because the heavens had opened and it really was throwing it down, which is very, very unpleasant. Very unpleasant indeed. I'm really pleased because it has been pretty miserable here. I think different parts of the country have been affected in different ways, haven't they? It does say showers, not across the whole country, so we'll just be grateful. Yeah, we've definitely had showers and such sunshine, beautiful blue skies looking to one side, and then really dark, thundery ones looking the other direction. And I need these to dry. I'm rather thinking if I can get all of the bits painted and prepped, then it becomes a layering activity. We might need to add a little bit more gold paint, I think, onto a couple of areas of that gold frame. So we'll, as we can see where the areas that are where I've clearly missed or touched, we'll just touch that up whilst the going is good. Cover those areas. There we are. Knock up the mess. Okay. So paint, crackle medium. Paint, and I'm not going to dollop that onto the project. I'm not surprised, Faith, if it was anything like the heavens right here. Now, at this point, you can do one of two things. You could paint this on, or you can tap it on. My preference, because I think you get a nicer crackle, is to dab it on. And I'm fairly careful not to go back over pieces once I've added paint onto them. You tend to get bigger cracks if you paint it, and if you're painting it long sweeps rather than going back over things, because it's quite difficult to disguise the joins where you link things in, as poor, I think it was Yanis, found out the other day on air when he was painting with Dawn. There we are. I've got a bit of wet medium there, that's not very helpful. Cool. Look, she says. So, let's just heat dry this little lot. If I lift that up, you can see how beautifully that has crackled and how I've got the gold coming through. And then I'm going to move this lot and I will have a little clean down and we'll start messing about and putting, oh, she says that wasn't fully dry, so we've knocked off some of that crackle. This crackle really does need to be completely dry through and through before you touch it, or add anything else on top. So just be mindful of that when you're picking up your pieces. And as I say, I would quite often just walk away, let things crackle on their own in their own sweet time, rather than messing about. But lives don't allow for that. There we are. So, I want this to be a little bit more gold, so I'm just going to edge around it, and this is gold wax, so I'm not going to wipe this back because that's not what it's intended for. This is literally is ordinary gold wax, whereas the one that I used on the resin pieces to wipe back was the antique paste, which is a very different piece. Beast. There we are. And these will just help with the edging and the final finish of these pieces. There we are. Hello, Alison. If you've been with, I think you were here at the start. My messages have just said that you're watching. That presumably means it's just been quiet and it's finally catching up on itself. Or did Facebook throw you out and be a pain and you've had to come back in? Because who knows, with the world of Face, it does its own thing. No, you don't want to stick that in the paint. That wouldn't be a good look. There we are. Right, that can go there, that can go there. They're not completely dry, so just bear with me whilst those can go over there for the moment. And you can go over there. That mess can get wiped up before we have it every which way. Whilst that, we can do this. I'll just scrape, excuse me the scraping noises because it's not very nice to hear, but I just want to get rid of some of this mess before I transfer it all to a project. And a blade makes a very efficient scraping implement. And I can sort of double up what I'm doing at the same time. Just why wouldn't you? There we are. Right, excellent. We might have got the worst of that off. We won't have got it all, but hey ho. We're going to have more rubbish out in a minute, stuff out in a minute anyway. So there we are. Let's just wipe some of that. Grab a cleaner cloth. I don't like using masses and masses of baby wipes, but needs must, I think, in this circumstance. Yeah, because it's otherwise yucky. Cool. They still need to be dried thoroughly. I love blue gold as a combination. I also like deep burgundy and gold. I think it works wonderfully. And I'm debating adding some of the gold wax to this because, as I say, it's an antique. It's an antique, or almost a white gold rather than a gold. And I'm thinking it might look better edged with some copper gold. Let's leave those to cool down and go with my instinct, because it's not going to take me very long to do that. And I think, you know, it will just add something to the edges of these by linking it in, and get rid of the brown around the edge of the MDF. There we are. So I hope people are looking forward to the rest of the lives this week. There's quite a few. I think Sam Lang has signed up to do 2. One I know is for Pretty Gets Gritty. Is it Pretty Gets Gritty? I think it's Pretty Gets Gritty. And one for whoever she wanted to. I think it's completely freelance, so a bit like this. So that's a couple of couple more lives for the Friday and the weekend. As I say, I'm going to be missing them, so please don't think I'm being rude when I'm not in the group over the weekend, or certainly not over Friday and Saturday, because I will be in a car, I strongly suspect, for most of Saturday or after my class. There we are. Cool. How few cool. These still feel a little tacky. I am going to do this cautiously. So I want to keep to my blue theme, and I could have chosen turquoisey colour from antiquing gel, which is essentially the same type of product, but I felt it was the wrong shade of blue to add to these pieces, so hence my choice of the vintage patinas from Stamperia for this bit, rather than the an antiquing gel. And it's purely a colour thing, and that's why I think it's quite important that we, you know, that we don't necessarily always stick to one brand. Look at your project and decide what's the colour that's going to work for you on that project, and go for the company that has a colour that works, because ultimately it's the colour that you see, not the brand name of the product that you've used. So let me grab. I'm going to need to be moderately careful here, because I'm conscious that is not necessarily completely dried through and through, but I'm going to get a two-toned effect frame, and I can lift off as much or as little as I want. Now the thing with both the antiquing gel and the vintage patinas is that you shouldn't let them dry before you try wiping off, because once they are dry they are permanent. So it's really quite important that you wipe back, and a damp cloth will do the trick. You don't need a soaking wet one. But by doing this, I'm keeping all of my, I'm picking up the golds and the keeping the golds from my papers, the blues from the papers, the same all the way through my project. I hope that makes sense to everyone. There we are. And it's just sitting in all of the recesses of the mould. Thank you, Annie. Annie, I totally agree that turquoise would have been wrong. So I could, you know, I could have taken a darker, and I deliberately wanted something that was going to sit back from the cracks, and so the dark blue from a vintage patina, which is actually made by Pentart, let's be honest, it is made by them for Stamperia, so it's essentially an antiquing gel, just was the better colour combination for the make that I had in mind. So there we are. Right, yeah, look at that. That really is going to have, before I pick up any papers, is going to have a good wipe down, because then we're going to have some fun layering and inking paper edges, because I haven't inked those, which is possibly my fault, and possibly I should have done before we started, but hey ho. Right, so let's get as much of that off there as possible, because otherwise it will just transfer onto things, and then I'll be cross with myself for making a mess when I didn't want to. So we now have essentially all of our components made, and that extra bit that I added I can now trim off quite happily if I can get it flat on here. There we are. There. So we have one collage background. Let me get rid of some of this extraneous product that's lurking all around so that there is room, because it is a huge piece. And now we're going to set things out. So I think that's where that's going. That's going there. Mechamoth is going to go onto there on a wonk, because that one is going to go there, with my little frame and my little moth, so they all pop off against each other, if that makes sense. Now I wanted these to be lifted and layered up a little bit, so that piece is going to tuck underneath there, and we're going to see parts of it. If I lay this out, ladies, how I want it, then I think you'll be able to see where I'm coming from in terms of the make overall, and because the gluing it all together is all very well and good, but you might lose the will to live if I that's going to go over there, that's going to go over there, that's going to go over there. Otherwise you might lose the will to live, or not, as the case may be. So we have two bows. So when I'm making a project like this, what I'm doing is looking at what I've got, and I'm starting with my big pieces, putting them where I want them, and then I'm going to layer my other pieces and tuck them in and underneath. So I've got my bow, and I'm deliberately leaving a tail, then I'm going to wrap that round, and this will give me a bowstring. And I've just picked some embroidery thread because that's what I had to hand. And then I can knock this off. Not knock. And then I've at least got some bowstrings on my bows, because it wouldn't look right to have a bow without. Now the trick for these is a surgeon's knot, which I'll repeat. So a surgeon's knot is not the same as a wreath knot. So you do a single throw, and then for your second layer you'd go under and under again, so you've got 2 throws, and those will then grip, and that will not come apart. It's the knot I used for 30 odd years as a surgeon, and it never ever failed me. So it's a trick worth knowing, is that knot. And to make my life easier, I'm going over with that first piece, because I'm going over and under, over and under, over and under, because then these 2 ends are on the opposite sides of my MDF. And clearly I would not, in a patient, have used a knife on my fingers or my jaw to do that, but I would have had a helpful assistant to hold on. So that has another of my surgeon's knots lurking on there. So I now have 2 bows to go with my 2 violins, she says, and that can, perhaps I'll put that away rather than chopping my finger off with it. Okay, so we're going to have Mecha Moth, and we're going to have 2 bows sitting possibly like that, possibly not. We might do that and that and put the Mecha Moth on top, or like that. We'll see. We will see. We'll pop it down like that. Might work better. We'll have a little fiddle with those. So I need some bits to finish and to bring this together. And as we know, I had all sorts of bits cut out at the start. And I'm going to layer these in place because I'm conscious that the time's getting on, and I will glue these off camera, but when you know where things are going, so that the only bit that you won't see is me picking everything back up and putting it back down. Now birds are not flat creatures, so he is going to go up there, and he needs a bit more room because I'm off camera, so that needs to come down just because he needs a bit more space to be there, if that makes sense. And I've got, these are circles cut from the paper collection, simple, you know, literally are just circles cut from the collection. So that can go under there, and all I'm doing is I'm using my elements to bridge all of the pieces so that they're not sitting in isolation, if that makes sense. Because so that my bird is now linked to my violin. Yeah, I know that I want these pieces down here, and I'm going to deliberately, if I swiggle this around again so you've got a better view, I want some of these under and some of these over. So let me just edge around the pieces, and the heavens have opened, because why wouldn't you? So that is going to tuck underneath there. This, now when these feathers are in the collection, and I could have got a craft knife out and cut out all of those white pieces, but actually if you ink over them it doesn't matter so much. So that piece is going to tuck underneath there. Let me carry on, because you can see where we're building. As I say, I will glue these off camera, but I'm just going to position them and give it a good scrumple. It's going to add to the texture of the piece, so that can sit on there. I have used, when I was making, if people want to go hunting, I have used predominantly the 12 by 12 paper pad, but I have also used elements from the 6 by 6 fussy cut pad, so not too hugely orientated. And this one I want to tuck underneath that violin to fill that gap into there, so that can go there. And there is in the 12 by 12 pad, there is another, on the same sheet of paper, there is another one of these big peacock feathers is the word I'm looking for, and of course these will sit into here quite comfortably when they've got some glue gel on place. So that can go there, that can go there, and that bird is going to sit onto there, if that makes sense. And I might pop that there. So then I have some other bits and pieces, because currently some of these are still a bit floating in the middle of nowhere, which is not a good look. So that little clock is going to tuck underneath there. So that fills that gap and makes it more whole to my, or more pleasing to my eye. I've sort of got a gap here and an embellishment that's sort of in the middle of nowhere, and that's cool, but it's not a look I like. I do like all of my pieces to be linked. So this piece is going to tuck underneath there, and this is why it's important to, just to play with your positioning as you go. And I've deliberately pushed this piece under, so it's underneath the fingerboard for the violin, so I don't have a sudden change there, if that makes sense. And we have some other pieces. So I want something here to link with that. And I've got a word there, so that is going to sit there, link those pieces together. And I have another set of words here, write your story, so that is going to sit there with this piece tucked over it, like that. Again, dealing with that line that's there. The piece that I'm not currently happy with is that, and I think I might actually do this instead. So this is about the playing with what you're doing. I've got another set of words here, whether I need it or not is another matter, but I'm going to pop that under there and under there. That makes sense. Am I happy? I'm sort of happy. So we've got some bits and pieces here that just need to be, that's still sitting in, a little bit in free air. That's bit sitting on its own. So we've got a little clock here. She says, where's her ink pad? There we are. So we're going to ground our clock like that. We're going to pop that like that. There we are. And we've got some more pieces. And sometimes actually what you're better off doing is doing this and then just walking away. There we are. And leaving it overnight and then coming back with fresh eyes in the following day to make sure that you're truly happy with 1, 2, 3. Well, that's conveniently not right, isn't it? Oh, well, maybe that's X1, 2. There we are, up over there. You know, you can see where we're going from this point of view. So let's just pop that underneath there. And I've clearly got a nice big clock here. And I might not have intended to use it, and I might have intended to use it. Who knows? Who knows? So that piece can go underneath there. Possibly. Maybe not. It's looking a bit busy. I might pop that underneath there. Underneath that bird collection that's sitting here. So a combination of some dimensional glue. There we are. We'll hold these pieces in place for me. There we are. Put that there. There we are. So that is essentially our piece, not quite all put together, but how I wanted it. Not quite how I wanted it, because I've still got some bits here. But hey ho. I know where we want that one. There we are. So we'll leave that off there, that there. So I will use some pin flare glue and some of Dawn Bibby's glue to glue all of this lot in, probably tomorrow, and then I will photograph and take a picture of this piece. So, but that is my thought process, and as to how to put it together, how to assemble it, and how to bring bits that actually might have seemed very different, and maybe ones that you might have thought these don't really go together, but actually allow you to put it all together. And they're your different colours, your different compositions. I've got lighter tones, I've got dark tones, I've got golds, I've got and I might just give it a good splatter with some gold paint and some dark blue paint, and I might even get some white out, but we'll see what that looks like in the morning. And I will be completely honest when I post it. If I've added colour pieces to it, I will share that with everyone, so that you know that that's what I've done. So that is all for tonight, ladies. I hope it has been helpful to understand my process, and I will, as I say, I will post a picture of the finished make when I've got a chance, or had a chance, to glue it all into place, because I'm going to spend ages lifting and sticking it all back down. You don't need to see that at this point. Okay, so good night, stay safe, ladies, and enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.